For 7 years, I believed I was living a life many would envy. Jessica and I met in college, and from our first date at a small Italian cafe near campus, it felt like we were meant to be. She had a laugh that could light up a room, an adventurous spirit, and a warmth about her that made me feel like the luckiest man alive. Our relationship had its ups and downs like any other, but we always seemed to work through them. After graduation, we moved to Chicago, where I landed a steady job in finance, and Jessica started working in marketing. We rented a cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood and spent weekends exploring the city, going on road trips, or hosting game nights with friends. Over the years, I thought we had built something unshakable. We got married on a crisp autumn afternoon, surrounded by family and friends, under a canopy of golden leaves. Our vows were heartfelt, our future seemed bright, and I was certain Jessica and I were partners for life. But looking back now, I realized there were cracks in the foundation long before I noticed them. The signs were subtle, almost too easy to dismiss. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. It started innocently enough, at least that's what I told myself. Jessica began working longer hours, claiming her company was taking on a big new client. At first, I admired her dedication. She'd come home late, exhausted but upbeat, often talking about how exciting the project was and how her team was putting in so much effort. But then came the unexplained text messages. One night, as she sat beside me on the couch scrolling through her phone, it buzzed with a notification. I glanced over absent-mindedly and caught a name I didn't recognize, Brandon. "Who's Brandon?" I asked casually. Jessica barely looked up. "Oh, he's one of the consultants we hired for the project. He's brilliant, honestly, and a lifesaver for the team." Her answer was so breezy, so nonchalant, that I didn't press further. Why would I? This was Jessica, my Jessica. She had never given me a reason to doubt her before. But then there were the little things that didn't sit quite right. Like how she suddenly started dressing more carefully before work. Or how she'd laugh at text messages but never show me what they said. Once, I reached out for her phone while she was in the kitchen, intending to look up a recipe we talked about earlier, and she darted back to grab it before I could unlock it. "Privacy, babe," she said with a teasing smile. "I've got some embarrassing work photos on there." It was small things, insignificant on their own, but together they planted a seed of doubt in my mind. The longer her project dragged on, the more restless I became. Jessica was staying later at the office, sometimes not coming home until well after midnight. When I asked if everything was okay, she assured me it was just the nature of the job. "You know how it is," she'd say, kissing me on the cheek. "Corporate life can be a grind sometimes. But it's temporary, I promise." I tried to believe her. I wanted to believe her. After all, this was Jessica, the woman who stood beside me through thick and thin. But that seed of doubt had started to grow, and it whispered insidious thoughts in my mind. One Friday night, I decided to surprise her at work. I packed a small bag with her favorite takeout and drove to her office downtown. I envisioned her smile when I walked in with the food, her relief at having a moment to unwind. But when I arrived, the floor was nearly empty. The receptionist gave me a curious look. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I said, feeling the first stirrings of unease. "I'm looking for Jessica. She's my wife, and she's working late on the big client project." The receptionist frowned. "Oh, I think most of her team left hours ago. The consultants wrapped up earlier today." I forced a smile. "Maybe she's still in her office." She gave a half shrug, gesturing toward the elevators. "Feel free to check." Jessica's desk was deserted when I reached her floor. Her coat and bag were gone, and her computer was powered down. I sat in her chair for a moment, trying to reconcile what I'd just heard. Maybe she had stepped out for coffee or gone to meet with a colleague in another part of the building. But as I drove home, an unfamiliar ache settled in my chest. I didn't bring up the incident when she finally came home late that night. I couldn't explain why, but I wanted her to have the chance to explain herself without me confronting her. That weekend, I decided to confront Jessica, carefully. Over breakfast, I casually mentioned my visit to her office on Friday night. Her reaction was immediate and, to my relief, seemed genuine. "Oh no, you went all the way there?" she asked, her face creasing in surprise. "I'm so sorry, babe. We had a last-minute client dinner downtown. I must have forgotten to tell you." Her explanation was seamless. She even added details, how the dinner was exhausting and how her boss wouldn't stop talking about quarterly reports. It sounded plausible enough, and the way she reached across the table to squeeze my hand made me feel ridiculous for doubting her. Still, something gnawed at me. Later that day, I noticed her phone sitting on the counter while she showered. Normally, I respected her privacy, but that seed of doubt had turned into something darker. I opened her messages, telling myself it was harmless. Most of her recent texts were to coworkers and friends. But when I searched for Brandon, there it was, a string of casual exchanges, mostly work-related, with nothing out of the ordinary. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. What was I doing? Jessica had done nothing wrong, and here I was snooping like some paranoid fool. She came out of the bathroom moments later, towel wrapped around her hair, and kissed me as if nothing was amiss. I decided to let it go. Maybe I was just overthinking things. For the next few weeks, I tried to push my doubts aside. Jessica and I settled back into our routine, and things felt normal, almost too normal. She was attentive, affectionate, and even made an effort to plan date nights, something we hadn't done in months. It was as if she could sense my unease and was trying to reassure me. But then something happened that I couldn't ignore. One evening, Jessica left her laptop open on the dining table. I walked by and noticed an email thread with the subject line, "Dinner Plans." It was from Brandon. The name alone sent a jolt through me, but what struck me was the tone of the emails. They were friendly, too friendly. "Brandon, can't wait for tomorrow. Last time was amazing." Winking face. "Jessica, you're terrible. Just don't get us caught, Mr. Smooth Talker." My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was vague enough that it could have been a joke, but the emojis and her playful tone were far from professional. When she walked into the room, I quickly stepped away from the laptop, my heart pounding. She noticed my expression immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Nothing," I said too quickly. "Just tired, I guess." She gave me a concerned look but didn't press further. I spent the rest of the evening in a daze, replaying the emails in my head. Were they harmless banter, or was there something more? I knew I had to find out, but confronting her without solid proof would only lead to another convincing explanation. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The emails between Jessica and Brandon gnawed at me. But if I confronted her too soon, she'd likely dismiss it as harmless and accuse me of overreacting. I needed something concrete. Jessica's behavior became increasingly suspicious. She was suddenly protective of her phone, taking it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She also began staying out later, claiming she was attending networking events or meeting clients. Each excuse was delivered with her signature confidence, but I could feel the distance growing between us. One night, after she said she'd be home late again, I decided to follow her. It was a desperate move, one I never thought I'd resort to, but the doubt in my mind had become unbearable. I waited until she left, then gave her a 10-minute head start before getting into my car. My heart raced as I tailed her through the city. Eventually, she pulled into the parking lot of an upscale bar and restaurant. I parked discreetly and watched as she entered. Moments later, I saw Brandon join her. My stomach churned as I observed them through the window. They sat close together, laughing, their body language intimate in a way that felt like a dagger to my chest. Still, I told myself it could all be innocent. Perhaps it was a work meeting, just two colleagues unwinding after a stressful day. But then I saw her place her hand on his arm, lingering there far too long for it to be platonic. I drove home in a daze, my thoughts a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and disbelief. When Jessica came home later that night, she was cheerful, carrying the faint scent of wine. She kissed me on the cheek and climbed into bed as if nothing had happened. For the first time in 7 years, I didn't sleep beside her. I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering what had become of the woman I thought I knew. After that night, my mind was consumed by thoughts of betrayal. I knew I couldn't live in limbo anymore, vacillating between doubt and trust. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Jessica's patterns didn't change. She continued her late nights, always armed with an excuse that sounded just plausible enough to be true. But now, every word she spoke felt like a lie, every smile like a mask hiding the truth. The doubt was eating me alive. One evening, while she was out with clients, I took a drastic step. I installed a tracking app on her phone. It wasn't something I was proud of, invading her privacy felt wrong, but I was desperate. I needed undeniable proof. A few nights later, the tracker pinged her location at a boutique hotel across town. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, the bright red dot marking her betrayal. I sat in my car outside the hotel for what felt like hours, debating what to do. My heart told me to confront her, to demand answers, but my head urged caution. Without hard evidence, she'd find a way to twist the narrative, and I'd be left feeling even more uncertain. The next morning, I decided to search her phone when she left it unattended. My hands shook as I navigated to her messages. And there it was, a chain of texts with Brandon that erased any remaining doubt. Brandon, last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Jessica, you're making me blush. Stop it. I'll see you Thursday. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. There was no misinterpreting this. Jessica wasn't just having an emotional affair, this was physical, intimate, a betrayal of the deepest kind. When she returned home later that day, I confronted her. My voice shook with anger and pain as I laid the evidence before her. For the first time in our 7 years together, Jessica looked genuinely caught off guard. How could you? I demanded, my voice cracking. How could you do this to us? Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. She stood frozen, guilt and panic etched across her face. Jessica finally found her voice, but her first words only added fuel to the fire. You went through my phone, she snapped, her tone defensive. That's a serious invasion of privacy, Nathan. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's what you're worried about? Privacy? Not the fact that you've been sneaking around with Brandon? Her face fell, and for a moment, I saw the woman I thought I knew, the one who had shared dreams and promises with me. But it was fleeting, replaced quickly by a steely resolve. It's not what it looks like, she said, her voice trembling but defiant. Brandon and I are just close. He's been helping me through some tough times at work. That's all. I laughed bitterly. Helping you? By booking hotel rooms and sending texts about how incredible last night was? Jessica, do you think I'm stupid? Her lips pressed into a thin line, and tears began to well up in her eyes. Okay, she admitted softly. Maybe it went a little too far. But it didn't mean anything. It's just, work has been stressful, and I felt like I couldn't talk to you about it anymore. He was just there. Her words stung more than I expected. She was shifting the blame, turning my pain into a discussion about her unhappiness. But I wasn't buying it. You couldn't talk to me. That's a cop-out, Jessica. If something was wrong, you owed it to me to say something, not to run into someone else's arms. She started crying then, but it wasn't the kind of crying that inspired sympathy. It felt manipulative, an attempt to shift the narrative. "I'm sorry," she whispered through her tears. "I made a mistake, Nathan. I love you. Please, let's work through this." Her words might have carried weight a week ago, but now they felt hollow. The damage was done, and I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. Jessica's tears lingered in my mind long after our confrontation ended. She stayed in the bedroom that night while I paced the living room, trying to make sense of it all. The betrayal wasn't just in her actions, it was in every lie, every excuse, every moment she chose someone else over the life we'd built together. I cycled through every emotion imaginable: rage, heartbreak, disbelief, and even guilt. Could I have done something to prevent this? Was I too inattentive, too absorbed in my own work? But each time, I reminded myself, cheating wasn't something I forced her to do. It was a choice, a selfish, deliberate choice. The next morning, she emerged from the bedroom looking pale and exhausted. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes puffy from crying. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what more there was to say. "I know I've hurt you," she began, her voice trembling. "And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want to fix this. I'll end things with Brandon. I'll do whatever it takes." I stared at her, searching for sincerity in her words. Part of me wanted to believe her, to cling to the hope that we could salvage what we had. But the other part, the part that had spent sleepless nights doubting her, that had read the damning texts and watched her lies unravel, knew better. "How do I know I can trust you?" I asked, my voice raw. "How do I know this won't happen again?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw genuine regret in her eyes. "You don't," she admitted. "But I'll prove it to you. I'll go to counseling, quit my job, whatever you need." Her promises sounded desperate, and while part of me appreciated the effort, I wasn't sure it was enough. Trust wasn't something you could rebuild overnight. And in that moment, I wasn't even sure I wanted to try. Jessica's promises hung in the air like a fog, but I wasn't ready to let her dictate the terms of my healing. If I was going to come out of this with my dignity intact, I needed to take charge. No more second-guessing. No more waiting for answers. I spent the next few days in quiet contemplation, while Jessica walked on eggshells around me. She'd hover in doorways, waiting for me to engage, only to retreat when I stayed silent. I knew I owed her a decision, an answer about whether I was willing to work things out, but I wasn't ready to give her one. Not yet. Instead, I began gathering my own resources. I reached out to a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Linda, who listened to my story with a mix of empathy and pragmatism. "You have options," she told me. "If you want to pursue divorce, we can ensure you come out of this as cleanly as possible. But if you're leaning toward reconciliation, you'll need to protect yourself financially and emotionally. Either way, the ball is in your court." Hearing her say that was a turning point for me. For so long, I'd felt powerless, trapped in a situation I didn't create. But now, I realized I had the ability to set the terms for what came next. That night, I sat Jessica down at the kitchen table. Her eyes were wide with hope, but I didn't let it soften my resolve. "Here's what's going to happen," I began, my voice steady. "We're going to separate for a while. I need time and space to figure out if this marriage is salvageable. In the meantime, you need to prove to me that you're serious about making this right. That means no contact with Brandon, at all, and full transparency. If you're not willing to do that, we're done." Her face crumpled, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'll do it," she whispered. "I'll do anything." I nodded, but inside, I wasn't so sure. Her words were easy, too easy. The hard part would be watching her follow through, if she even could. Jessica moved out the next day. It wasn't an eviction, I didn't want to be cruel, but we both needed distance. She packed a few bags and said she'd stay with a friend for a while. As I watched her leave, a strange mix of emotions washed over me. Relief. Sadness. Anger. It felt like the end of an era, yet part of me clung to the possibility of reconciliation. With the house to myself, I had time to think, to process everything that had happened. At first, the quiet was unbearable. Every corner of the home reminded me of her, the framed wedding photos on the mantel, the throw blanket she loved to wrap herself in during movie nights. But as the days passed, the silence became my ally. It gave me the clarity I desperately needed. Jessica tried to keep her word. She sent me daily updates, screenshots of messages to her boss requesting to change teams, photos of deleted conversations with Brandon, and even receipts for therapy sessions. She was making an effort, I had to give her that. But I couldn't ignore the nagging voice in the back of my mind that whispered, "It's too little, too late." One evening, about 2 weeks into our separation, I decided to do some digging of my own. I hired a private investigator, a man named Robert who came highly recommended. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but I needed closure, something definitive to put this chapter behind me. Robert worked fast. Within days, he provided me with photos and reports that confirmed my worst fears. Jessica and Brandon had met up twice since our separation. The no-contact promise had been a lie. When Robert showed me the photos, I felt a strange calm settle over me. There they were, laughing together at a coffee shop, her hand on his arm. It wasn't as incriminating as a hotel room, but it was enough. Enough to prove that her words meant nothing. Enough to convince me that I deserved better. Armed with the evidence, I knew it was time to close this chapter for good. Jessica's betrayal wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment, it was a pattern of lies and deception. I wasn't going to let her string me along any longer. The next evening, I asked her to come over so we could talk. She arrived looking hopeful, her hair neatly styled and her makeup carefully done, as if she was trying to remind me of the woman I had fallen in love with. But my resolve didn't waver. We sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I gave you a chance, Jessica," I began, my voice steady. "I told you no contact, and I meant it. But you couldn't even do that." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about?" I placed Robert's photos on the coffee table between us. Her face drained of color as she stared at them. For a moment, she didn't speak, as though searching for an excuse. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered. "I was just meeting him to end things officially. I didn't want to hurt you anymore." I shook my head, incredulous. "You really think I'm going to believe that? You've lied to me at every turn, Jessica. I'm done." Her tears came then, streaming down her face as she begged for another chance. She said all the things I'd once longed to hear, that she loved me, that she regretted everything, that she was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. But her words felt hollow, like echoes in an empty room. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice firm. "I deserve better. I'm filing for divorce." Her cries turned to anger, and she began hurling accusations, blaming me for her actions, accusing me of being distant, unloving. But her words couldn't touch me anymore. I had made my decision, and there was no going back. Filing for divorce was easier than I expected, at least logistically. Emotionally, it was another story. 7 years of love, memories, and plans for the future unraveled in the span of a few weeks. But as painful as it was, I felt a sense of liberation. For the first time in months, I was reclaiming control over my life. Jessica's reaction was a mix of desperation and defiance. At first, she pleaded with me to reconsider, sending long text messages and emails filled with apologies and promises. When that didn't work, she shifted to anger, threatening to drag the divorce out and take everything I had. Unfortunately for her, the truth was on my side. Linda, my lawyer, was relentless. Armed with the evidence of her affair, we negotiated terms that were more than fair to me. I kept the house, the majority of our joint savings, and even the dog, Charlie. Jessica hadn't cared much for him anyway. Meanwhile, Jessica's life seemed to spiral out of control. Her relationship with Brandon didn't survive the fallout. From what I heard through mutual acquaintances, his interest in her waned the moment things got complicated. He ghosted her not long after the divorce proceedings began. Professionally, things didn't fare much better for her. She had to transfer to another team at work to avoid the awkwardness of being around Brandon, and her reputation took a hit when whispers of the affair circulated among her colleagues. She became a shadow of the confident, vibrant woman I once knew. As the ink dried on the divorce papers, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The life I had known was over, but in its place was something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't tethered to someone who lied to me or made me question my worth. I focused on rebuilding my life. Therapy helped me untangle the mess of emotions I had been carrying: anger, betrayal, and even guilt for not recognizing the signs sooner. My therapist reminded me that none of this was my fault, that Jessica's choices were hers alone, and that I deserved to find happiness again. I reconnected with old friends, took up hobbies I'd neglected, and even started traveling. A solo trip to Colorado's Rocky Mountains was a turning point for me. Standing on a windswept peak, looking out over endless valleys and jagged peaks, I felt small but invincible. The world was so much bigger than the pain I'd been carrying. Jessica tried reaching out a few times after the divorce. She sent messages apologizing, asking for closure, even hinting at wanting to try again. I never responded. My silence wasn't out of spite, it was for my own peace. I had nothing left to say, and I wasn't about to reopen old wounds. Through it all, I discovered something important: I didn't need Jessica, or anyone else, to define my worth. I was stronger than I realized, capable of weathering storms I never thought I could endure. And as I moved forward, I carried that strength with me. Looking back now, I see Jessica's betrayal for what it was: a painful but necessary turning point in my life. For years, I built my world around her, believing our relationship was unshakable. But sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who teach us the hardest lessons. Jessica lost everything: her marriage, her relationship with Brandon, and the respect of those around her. Cheating isn't just a betrayal of trust, it's a betrayal of oneself. The lies, the secrecy, the selfishness, it all catches up to you in the end. And for her, it did. As for me, I came out of the situation stronger. I didn't just survive the heartbreak, I thrived in its aftermath. I learned to value honesty and loyalty, not just in others, but in myself. I've made a promise to never settle for less than I deserve, to recognize red flags, and to always listen to my instincts. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone going through a similar experience, it's this: betrayal doesn't define you. It hurts, it breaks you, but it also reshapes you. It teaches you what you truly need and deserve in life. Jessica's affair was the end of us, but it wasn't the end of me. In fact, it was the beginning of a chapter where I became the person I was always meant to be: someone stronger, wiser, and, most importantly, free.